What's up, everybody? Welcome to another Homestead from Scratch. I am Greg Dowd. I'm joined tonight with John Tejan, Logan Hyde, and just coming back from a X and Build land conference at the Polyface Farm up in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, around Staunton. Staunton, Virginia is where Joel Salatins Farm is. So I figured we'd talk a little bit about that, and if you guys have questions on the whole experience at the farm, we can cover what I gained from going to the conference and some of the things that I picked up from that. But how are you guys doing?
Great, no complaints. Very busy, but got a lot done today on my farm, so I'm pretty happy with that. So just small projects that have been needing to be done that are finally getting done. I harvested my first couple garlics since it's my first time doing garlic, and heck, they're the size of I don't know, about a baseball size cloves. They're pretty good size, and they're not elephant garlic. These are just some kind of Italian strain of garlic, and like I said, first time doing that. So you got to cure them just like onions or sweet potatoes. You got to let them dry a little bit before you can store them. So anybody in the chat that has experience with that wants to throw some tips in there, please do. But I'm kind of starting the garlic harvest here shortly, and that's kind of fun. And but other than that, I've just been staying busy, and grass keeps growing, the cows getting fatter, so hey, it's all good.
Excellent. Logan, what you doing to?
Same here, just staying busy. Everything's been good. I just wish it quit raining. Wish we could stop getting so many floods. Looks like we're going to get about 4 or 5 days of a little bit of a dry spell, so I'm happy about that. Here lately, been helping some friends of mine get their pigs slaughtered, so that way they can go to Yellowstone. It's the worst time of year to be slaughtering pigs is right now, and up until it gets back down below 50 degrees, just because of the lard. But considering that it's a kind of like got to get it done, I've been getting a mountain of free pork, so can't complain there. Yeah. I'll deal with the fat rolling all over me. But I mean, it's really good for your skin. I mean, my hands and forearms have never been more moisturized. So
awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it was while you guys were getting tons of rain, it held off on the weather for us up there last weekend, and it got cold. It got kind of cold, but it stayed really nice weather the entire time. So, and then it was kind of nonstop, showing up there from Thursday till we left on Monday. So, yeah, it was pretty nonstop. Lots of people there. I don't know what the final count was, but it had to be close to 100 people, something like that. And people from all over the states, as far as Washington State, all the way up the Northeast. There was a couple I met from Vermont that moved to Alabama. So some folks that I had met at some previous conferences that have moved out of the city and started their own homestead. So that's pretty cool, actually. Getting to hear their stories and getting to catch up with them. So it was a really cool experience. And if you ever get a chance to go see Joel Salatins Farm in person, I say take that opportunity, because it's really, they have done a lot there, and it is kind of the beacon on how you can do this regenerative agriculture and make it work economically for a small family farm. And it really they were really able to demonstrate that and show us how they make the whole operation work. And it's really something cool.
But I mean, really, Greg, can you actually consider that a small family operation anymore?
So they built it off of, basically it was 3 generations from what Joel Salatin says. His grandfather wanted a farm but couldn't make it work. His father wanted to have a farm but always had to have a separate thing he was doing to bring income to build a farm. And then Joel was the 3rd generation that was able to make the farm happen. And they grew it from basically just Joel and his wife Teresa into having 22 full-time salaries that are derived off of the farm. So is it a small family farm anymore? Probably not, when you think about all the salaries that are derived off of that farm now. But it's in their family and it's not leaving. From what Joel says, that they have no plans on selling off to anybody. So Daniel is his son that's going to take over the reins after Joel is gone, and it's going to remain part of their family. And they'll keep it going. And really it's all about what Joel's role now is to get out to a lot of these public speaking events and evangelize for this way of farming. And Daniel runs a lot of the day-to-day operations there and everything. So yeah, it's in their family. They have their methods and ways that they've developed over time to organize and bring on new people to the farm that want to contribute and become part of their farm enterprise there. So they continue to grow. And but when they got started, basically he talked about going and saving up enough money to where they moved into their parents' house, and they converted the loft area into a living area for him and his wife, and when they were getting started, and living off of $300 a month back in I think the 1980s, something like that. Didn't buy any new equipment, anything like that. They basically bootstrapped the whole thing. And his dad was part of I guess his grandfather had got a subscription to the Rodale Organic Farming magazine or something like that. And they started, just kind of implementing these organic practices and started to do everything mobile, basically creating all of his infrastructure is mobile infrastructure, so that if they had to, if they lost the farm or whatever, in any case, they could pick up and they could do this somewhere else. So that was the idea. And they had started in Venezuela. His dad had moved down to Venezuela at one point in time, and he was like an accountant guy, and wanted to do the farm, because his family had that vision of a farm, and so he grew up, I think, from maybe about 10 years old, something like that, in Venezuela. And then they had to get out there when there was kind of a coup happened, and then Venezuela went, I think, to the Maduro.
It'd have been Chavez at that time.
Yeah, whoever that took over in Venezuela, and it was the whole commie takeover down there, and they were kind of going after some of the farms, and since they were foreigners, that they were kind of not looked at favorably. So his dad kind of wanted to get back there to Venezuela, but they kind of gave up on so they had to move everything out, and then they settled in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia and found property over there and were able to purchase it. And well, from what he talks about, they in that area of the Shenandoah Valley, they live in what's it's a rain shade in that area. So it rains like double the amount around them, but they get half of the rain. So it might be 50, 60 inches of annual rainfall all around them, but they get like 30 inches, something like that, in the Shenandoah Valley. And he gave us a long history of how the Native Americans in that area would burn, do controlled burns through the region, and they had built up, like, I can't remember, he said like something like it was like 30 or maybe like 40 inches of topsoil in that area. So it was very fertile. And the grasses, he said there were accounts that they would ride their horses through there, and you could tie a knot from the top of your horse of the grasses that were in that region. So, but since then, since the Europeans moved in, they started doing their European agricultural practices with plowing and all that through the area. And if you looked into the soil food web and all that kind of stuff, whenever you start to disturb the soil and dig up all that stuff, it kind of is starting to kill all those microorganisms that's helping to create the nutrients for all the plants and everything. So over time, they had worn down that topsoil to like is only like, I don't know, like 6 inches of topsoil or something like that by the time that they had acquired the farm. And I think at one point, from their rotational grazing operations, they built that topsoil up to like 16 inches or something over time by what they've done with their rotational grazing. So it takes quite a long time to build that topsoil by doing this mob grazing technique, which mimics the patterns of the bison and how they would, travel in big herds and leave their manure and basically trim the grasses as they were going and all that to kind of mimic that predatory movement of the herds. They do that with the cows. So yeah, they've slowly built that soil back over time there.
Yeah, I saw where he talked about that when they first bought that farm, and he said when he was a kid, he could walk all the way across the pasture. It was so bare he could walk across the pasture and not step on a blade of grass. It was just so barren and worn out. There was just nothing there. And he said that when they first started putting in electric fencing, with T-posts and whatnot, it's like the ground was so hard. They would take car tires and fill them with cement and put a post in it and use that for their fence post. That's bad, man. That is really
yeah. He described that in his talk.
That was really bad. And he said they had gullies, 10 feet deep where the soil was just washing away. And he said it was probably the worst farm in the county, that his dad bought, because that's all he could afford after they lost everything in Venezuela. Right. And he said, but they made it work, right? 3 generations later, you've been there. It's amazing to see.
Yeah, 30 some odd years, I think, that they've been implementing this stuff, and so and they built it. They've really built up the topsoil there, so that they are in a much better position than where they started, which was basically like very infertile soils that had been
and
over time.
I think that's a good story to tell, and it's a good reminder of people who want to get started in this way of life. It didn't get the way it is now overnight. It took time, and it took a lot of work and a lot of failures and battling Mother Nature. It wasn't easy, and I'm sure he would be the first one to say that. But he's not a complainer, and he doesn't talk about that a whole lot because he's kind of a positive guy. But if you buy a piece of land and it's going to look like Polyface Farm in 5 years, you might be a little disappointed. It takes a while and it takes hard work. So
yeah,
but I think that's a good message from that. It took him 30 plus years to get where he's at, but he stuck with it, and pretty amazing story.
He got pretty emotional when he talked about how his dad would look at the farm where it is right now, because that was his big dream. And he remembered that when they first started to become profitable and they were just making more than what they needed to just survive, that and they said that we could start giving this a real go and start moving forward, that his dad sat him down and he was in his bed, he couldn't really move around or anything at that point, but he called him in to talk to him. And he said, let's sit down and let's figure out how many people we can pay for working on this farm. And so they worked it out at the time, and they came up with like about 22. And now that they're at that point where they could have 22 full-time people working on the farm. So that's pretty cool. And there's a lot of stuff in there on how they did that and how they figured out how, because people wanted to come out there and learn from what Joel was doing, and they needed people to help them, to do all this stuff. So they came up with this whole way of pulling in people that want to learn, and started like this whole application process. And he doesn't call them farm hands, because he said you kind of like give the name of the role that you want the person to be. So they don't call them farm hands, they call them stewards, because that's what they are. They're like stewards of the land. So yeah, that's one part of it. It's a lot of the psychology of it too, and bringing in people to the farm is something that he talked a lot about. And yeah, there's a whole kind of whittling down process that happens there. When people submit applications, there's questions that they ask them, and I guess they're giving them time limits and stuff so that they know what they're expected to do. They give it like a manual to like kind of guide them on what their expectations are while they're there on the farm and everything. And they put them through, I think it's like if you want to come and do this, they do a summer program, and I think that's like last 6 months. And then they do a year-long program for people that want to take it seriously and, possibly end up working on the farm or something like that, or moving on to do something on their own, or they can get into some kind of mutual enterprise with them where they can be either off farm doing something that works with the farm in some capacity. So really interesting ways that he's figured out how to work that angle. One of the very interesting things that he talked about was building good relationships with the community around you, the people that you do business with around you. And that's part of the whole community aspect of what was going on there at the Exit and Build Summit. And one of the things they do with all their laying hens, you get the pullet eggs from, the new layers that you can't really sell. So what they do is they take all those pullet eggs and they take them around to all the businesses that they shop with in the area, like the tire shops, like the fire department, the police department, mechanics, whoever those folks may be that they do business with in town there. And they take them all those pullet eggs and give them to them. as a gift. And so that kind of builds their goodwill in the community.
I'm curious, why can't they sell those eggs?
They're small.
They're real small.
Oh, so, I got you. It's just the size. Nobody wants small eggs. Understand that.
Yeah.
I had a problem since we have a lot of bantams and their eggs are small, and when a couple of years ago when the egg prices, they got high recently as well. I was taking them to work and selling them to people at work, and it's like some of them are like, these small eggs, my wife can't use them in her recipes because they're too small. And I said, understand that, I'm no harm, no foul, but so you take 4 of them to make an omelet instead of 3, big deal, that's my point of view. But people who are normally get a carton of eggs and they're like, well, these are kind of small. It's like, okay, I understand,
Well, that was
when you're paying $8 a dozen, and I'm selling them for $4, you can decide whether you want to buy them or not.
Well, that was one good takeaway from the conference, was that as homesteaders, we're not exactly tracking all our expenses on our animals and what they're producing, so what does it truly cost to produce those eggs? And so if you're tracking all your feed costs and everything that you're putting into those chickens and your time and all that on an Excel sheet or something, then you can come up with a reasonable price for what those eggs are, and that you shouldn't feel bad about charging the price that it took to put into that egg production to the people around you, because those eggs are going to be way better than what you could get in the store, as far as like the yolk and its richness and all that, and the happiness of the animals that you're raising and everything. So that's something to really think about for people that are homesteaders that want to sell their products around in the area, is like track your costs and then charge what it realistically took you to produce those eggs. And don't, if people aren't for that, then they're not for that. They can go buy them from Aldi. But the people that really understand about what that product that you're creating, that they're gonna find and seek you out. So so to hold the ground, track your expenses, and charge what is realistically what it costs your production to be able to do that. So and just to give a little insight into my pricing strategy, I don't necessarily do it that way. I rely on other people to do it that way. What I mean is, unlike probably a good amount of my competition, at least locally, I'm fortunate, and I don't have a mortgage on my property, right? So I don't have to make my cows pay my mortgage payment, which is a big expense, right? It's a huge expense. But what I do, just because that's a cost I don't have to deal with, and this is intentional for me, is like, I don't want to undercut people who are trying to do the right thing and trying to raise their families and pay that mortgage. So I'm going to charge what they pay, or what they charge. I'm not going to undercut them just because my costs are lower. I want to make sure that the local market value of grass-fed beef is what somebody can make a living at. Other than me, the people that are doing it, that are, raising a family, paying a mortgage, they may have an off-farm job too, but I don't want to try to, shortcut somebody and try to, so well, in any case, you don't want to be you don't want to be bleeding money is the bottom line.
No, true. No, you've got it, because over time you'll be out of business if you don't. That's just that's the bare truth about it, and that's what I'm saying. That's So I let other people kind of do that for me a little bit, and they're dealing with the same issues I am, the price of cattle, and getting cattle on your farm, it's expensive. The price of hay, everybody pays the same amount for. The price of fertilizer, everybody pays the same. So it's kind of, there's a market there, and I don't want to be the low ball, because you can find low ball people out there, they'll low ball you all day long. Because it's a hobby to them, and their farm's paid off, and they don't really, they think they're doing people a favor by charging them a lower price, but actually you're not. Because you know what, people aren't going to respect the value of the product that you're selling if you're selling the same price that somebody can buy it at Walmart for, right? They won't see any value.
You can't compare those because they're not the same product.
No, but if you sell it for the same price in the consumer's mind, it's the same product. I mean, I got the same thing except that I paid at Walmart. I got a great deal, but I don't think you respect the farmer that raised that and the animals that produce that. And
right, that was the big takeaway I got was listening to what folks had to say about that, about pricing your stuff accordingly to to what you're creating.
Well, Greg, unless you have, you probably have more comments about that, but I'd kind of be interested is, you went there, you saw all this stuff. What changes are you going to make, or does this change the way you're approaching what you're trying to do, and maybe some of the way you think about what you're doing? Was it enough of a learning experience? Is like, okay, maybe I should do things this way now instead of that way? Is there any aha moments or learning moments that you're going to implement going forward for yourself?
Yeah, so I guess the whole thing is exit and build, right? So we want to exit the system that we're in, and and that's big for me, is like, how do I get to a point where I can be autonomous and not have anybody holding anything over me that would lead to less freedom in my life. So and then the other part of that is build. So the first talk in there was saying, like, okay, exit is kind of, you're in a fear state of mind, right? You're like, oh crap, everything's going to hell. Let's exit. But then on the other side of that is build, and build is like having faith that, like, you're gonna move towards something better and in a positive direction. So it's kind of going from the fear state to like an abundance mindset, and so that really hit home. That really hit home with me, and seeing what Joel has done on his farm, and his whole story to me, and thinking about how do we get people together to work together in some kind of so we're not all lone wolves on our homesteads, that we're just out here doing the lone wolf thing on our homestead. How do we build like something around what we're doing to become more independent ourselves? And I do think that it has to go with some kind of entrepreneurial, there has to be some kind of entrepreneurial effort, some kind of farming effort, and growing that food locally and making it a business of some kind, and kind of focusing, like we've talked about in the past, treating your homestead as a business. And I think, it's a great way that all these people want to do intentional communities, but so many of them fail. It's unfortunate that it's that way, but it's I think a lot of them are like, okay, yeah, let's get together and let's do something together, but nobody really has a clear plan or how this whole thing is going to work as a community. So and then kind of things can kind of deteriorate from there because there's not a clear vision. So on Joel's farm, they have a very clear mission statement, and the goal that they're working towards. And I really think that the model that they have built is something to really look at when considering having some kind of a community, because I think you have to have somebody that's going to be the champion of it. That's going to be, we'd like to think that we can all be self-governing, I guess. We want to be self-governing and we want to be free individuals, but for any kind of effort, you kind of need somebody to like have a vision, and you need other people to help out and kind of bring that vision about. And it's not to say that like that can be the catalyst for somebody starting their own vision, off somewhere else, but there's got to be a way that people can like kind of come in and go out as they please. So it's all, voluntary, so, but I really think like if you don't have some kind of you don't have something that you're working towards and you don't have a clear plan, that it can kind of fall apart. So,
yeah, I think a lot about that, when you talk about intentional communities and their, remarkably high failure rate. But I think those can work, obviously. But I think you also kind of made a comment there that's important, is like the people that build those intentional communities, I think, should have already established their own business and know the ups and downs of having a profitable business on land.
Yeah.
Because if you got and there's, if you haven't done that, you still need a place to go to learn. You still have a place to go to learn. But unfortunately, in a lot of intentional communities, 90% of the people there don't have any, I don't want to say they don't have anything to offer and don't bring anything to the table. They're just as enthusiastic as everybody else, but they literally have not done that, and they've not crossed those bridges that the other people have. And it's like, I appreciate your hard work and everything, but this has got to be, capitalism, profit, whatever you want to call it. It's got to make sense and it's got to make money, or it won't last. And we see that, often they don't last. So yeah, you got to have those people there that have built a farm business, or at least some level of business, off their lands, because they've like Joel, you've made all the mistakes, you've learned from that, what works and doesn't work. Now there's always going to be disagreements about, well, should we go this way or that way, or but that's all communities are that way. But yeah, having that ability to really understand how money flows through your business really is what it comes down to. This comes in, that goes out, and I keep what's left. And if you're you need an off-farm job, but there's nothing wrong with that, to make that work, at least it's working, right? And that those are that's the algebra that you need to get to, and that's the equation that's going to give you the result that you need, and have already gone through that, as opposed to going, sounds great, I love hanging out with people who that's kind of the hippie commune failure point, is like everybody had the best intentions and they were enthusiastic and they were energetic, but they just kind of keystone cop their way out of being a community, unfortunately. But yeah, that's my only comment there. It's like, yeah, intentional communities are great, but they take a lot of work.
Well, there was a Haven Earth Trade School folks that were there, and they're doing something a little north of Chattanooga, I believe. And what he was talking about in there is like the people that come to them, they're building their little village there, based around this trade school of teaching people how to build with hempcrete. So that's the kind of the unifying vision for their little thing there. their community that they're working on. And it was mentioned several times that the word community has kind of got a dirty word, kind of become a dirty word, because it's like, what are you guys going to join a cult or something? It's like kind of got a dirty word to it. But so that's their economic engine for that property and what they're doing to make that work. But one of the things that that River talked about was the guy that is the visionary for the thing, is that a lot of people think that freedom means that I can go there and I'll just smoke weed all day and we'll just hang out and have a good time. But that's not what freedom is. If freedom is taking personal responsibility, and you're going to have to work hard at something to build what you want to see. So it's not, hey, let's just hang out and party, man. We got this great community. We'll just hang out and party all the time. You got to work. Like, you got to put forth an effort to derive income out of that place, or, whatever you're going to do. But it's not just about, hey, let's all sing Kumbaya and peace and harmony and we'll escape the system together. It's, taking some real personal responsibility and kind of grounding yourself in the reality that we live in, and putting forth a real effort toward doing something different,
Yeah, that reminds me. I don't know the name of it. There's a documentary on streaming off a streaming platform. I don't know what it is. Probably even on YouTube. But it is about the farm up in Summertown, Tennessee, not too far from where I live. And that's a remarkable story and a lot of lessons learned to watch when because basically it started in 1969, 1970. Like 3 school buses full of hippies came from California to Tennessee, and they bought a couple 100 acres. They pooled their money together, and it was just a commune, man. That's all it was. And but they worked really hard at it, and they were committed to what they were doing, and it was very inspirational what they were doing. But over time, because of their philosophy, their personal philosophy is if somebody shows up and wants to be part of the farm and needs to be fed, we'll feed them. And then after a while, that's all they had there were people that were just looking for a place to hang out because they ran out of options in their life. Not to say that's a bad thing, and that happens, but it's like when you're supporting all of these people who don't have any skills that can build your community further and push it forward, you kind of stagnate. And they also suffered from, again, not a commentary on anybody who's a vegetarian or vegan, but they were very much focused in that area. And they did not use any animals in the production of their farm. And it really, over time, bit them in the butt. It's like, you need to have animals on there. And I think they've modified that, in the past maybe 10 or 15 years. But it's a good one to watch when you're thinking about building. And I know it was hippies, but it doesn't matter if you're hippies or not. Intentional communities have the same problems, and you need to learn from the mistakes of other people, I think, and do some really good research before you form one. And but enough about intentional communities, but wasn't the focus. But we understand that that's what some people want to do.
Yeah. And I mean, that was what a lot of people go to this summit for, is like, how can we link up together to do something like that? And we're all looking to maximize our freedom in a world that looks like it's becoming a lot more tighter controls on people, and how can we live more freely. And and so that's kind of what a lot of people are coming in there as. And So got to meet a lot of cool people, and people in various stages of, maybe they just got some land and they're starting to do their thing on there, and then people that have been doing that for a while and have something set up, and people that are living in the suburbs that are dreaming about this, so yeah, there was people there from all ranges of the spectrum on looking to be more free, really.
Yep. I think that other point that you made, at least in reference to Polyface Farm, is you had, they have a mission statement. And I know it's kind of, when I went to business school back in the 80s and 90s, that was a big thing. Every company has to have a mission statement, and it kind of became a joke. But it's super important if you have some sort of goal in mind when you're doing this. Do you want to be off grid and completely disconnected from society? Do you want to be a permaculture person and regenerative? Because you can do both of those and they can look completely different. You can live in a community. You can try to run a business. I mean, there's a lot of things that people have to have a firm understanding, I think, when they start and go, this is my vision for the future, and those are going to be my guiding principles, and and go there, because I think about what I do, and it's not accessible for everybody because the price of land is so high to raise cattle on it. There's not that many people who are just shoestringing it and doing it, because it's just the money to start up is considerable, unless you're leasing the property. But still, that's money going out every month, and that you've got to make that payment on.
So that was a big thing talked about at the event as well, was that the largest impediment for a younger person to start doing this and getting a farm and doing all this, raising food, is capital. Like, a lot of younger people don't have the capital to purchase the land. And so, he was given some interesting like maybe entrepreneurial ideas, like, what if the farmer pays you as a rotational grazer to fertilize his pastures? That was one idea that he threw out there. So, there's creative ways of thinking about it, whether you lease land or, and that's why I like the whole mobile infrastructure that he has, is like, you could, if you needed to go farm on some other land, then you can pull up that infrastructure and go somewhere else. But, the best scenario would be you're living on or near the land that you're going to farm. Otherwise, it's going to be too overbearing for you probably to keep going with it, because
if you follow Greg Judy and read some of his stuff and listen to some of his talks, I mean, that was a huge problem for him. He was married and he was he did cows, but he had an off-farm job, and then he got a divorce and his wife pretty much wiped him out. He had to start over from nothing. No land, no cattle, no nothing. So he couldn't afford to buy any land. So he that's his whole thing, is lease the land. Mobile infrastructure, because you never know when that lease is going to run off and it might not be renewed. And you don't want to sink money onto a piece of property and put permanent fencing on it if in 5 years the guy goes, I'm not renewing your lease. And then it's like, okay, I just sunk $10,000 into fencing on that farm. I can't take it with me. So he's all into that mobile stuff because he leases his, he started to buy more and more because he's pretty successful. But it's like, the lease is up. I just pick up my solar charger, my poles, my wire, my watering trough, all my irrigation is all above ground. I just roll it up and move to the next farm, and he's not lost any investment in that equipment. And that's, and that's kind of what Joel does. I mean, without mobile infrastructure, or at least the portable electric fence, rotational grazing never really would have ever got established. It's impossible. It's not impossible, but it just would be, the whole idea of rotational grazing is you change the size of your paddocks according to what the cows are eating and what the weather is doing. So you can't have permanent paddocks, because you think of permanent paddocks, you think of going to England and sheep farms where they have stone walls. Their sheep paddocks are literally stone walls, and it's not like you're gonna take those down and resize it next year when you've got better rain or you've got more cows or more sheep. It's like you're kind of stuck with those paddocks for the next 100 years. But the mobile stuff is that you can resize and shift and shape. Maybe you had a bad year and you had to sell off half your cows because you needed the money for something else, or the market tanked or whatever, or it's a drought and they were going to die if you didn't sell them or whatever. You can reshape everything that way, and it's really smart business is what it is. It's really being flexible like that, and you can change your business depending on the conditions. And that's, everybody should think of that as well. It's like, don't get stuck in a mindset that, okay, I'm gonna have 30 chickens and that's it might, you might need 50 to get where you need to go, or you might only need 20, and so that infrastructure has to be flexible.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about how they get some of their food out there, there's all these USDA restrictions on processing the chickens and all that kind of stuff. So from what I gathered, a certain amount of the chickens that they raise do get processed by the USDA for them to ship across state lines, I guess, for some of the ones that they do for their like online ordering. But then there's a portion of them that are, that they don't go through that process, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They just process them on the farm, and I think they may sell those through their farm shop locally.
Well, I think their processing plant is actually owned by Polyface Farms. They just have a USDA inspector there.
Yeah.
So they're not going through a facility where they're going to go through the poo bath and everything. It's just that they have in that specific facility, so they can ship over state lines. There's a USDA inspector that can be there to make sure they check all the little boxes.
Yeah, and I think he talked about that is like the place that they were taking them to do that, like they were going to go out of business, I think, but they like basically came in and like kind of helped them keep it. Well, they took it over basically, I think, but they're still able to operate now that they've got Polyface in there, and they may have like partnered with them in some way, but I can't quite remember the details of that, but that's who they're using. And yeah, like Logan, you're saying, I think they have a USDA inspector guy in there to work with shipping all across the country, because they have that ability now.
Did he address, because I know I probably first started following Joel 15 years ago. Been a long time before I even thought I wanted to be a rotational grazer, right? But at that time, he was pretty adamant. He was pretty adamant of not selling online, and that if he could not deliver it to his customer, or they could not come to the farm, he just wasn't going to mess with it.
Yeah, so he explained that.
So something changed there for him. So I don't know if he explained that.
So he said the catalyst was COVID. That was the catalyst for them to start doing that, because
people couldn't get out.
He lost a lot of his customer base through the restaurants that they were selling to. So his big customer base was all the local restaurants that were buying his stuff from him. And like, I think he said like 90% of those went away during COVID.
Wow.
So they had to pivot into doing but they said that actually grew their business like incredibly. So,
oh, sure.
Yeah.
Because he'd built up a brand by then, you know, that people recognize, at least some people recognized, right?
Right.
But that's
Right.
pretty
So,
amazing.
yeah,
I didn't
that was
realize
the
that
catalyst for that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense, because he was pretty adamant before then. But you know, all that does is it just points out a potential weakness in your business model. You know, no matter how strongly you feel about it, you know, there may be no option. You know, that when things change like it did, and that's. I'm glad he pivoted and was successful at it.
Well, that I think that was a lot of what he kept hammering across was, don't invest in all the fancy equipment and stuff, and get creative with what you have and where you are, and kind of bootstrap yourself, because that way you can stay agile, and you can you're not going to lose everything by taking out huge loans, or putting a ton of capital into something. Kind of like grow it over time, and build it over time, and use and be creative with what you have, and be real, be frugal with how you build out infrastructure. And don't build 20 chicken tractors right off the bat and just say, hey, we're going to raise 200, 300 birds or something or the 1,000 meat birds, and we're going to go all gangbusters with it right away. Just do it small and start seeing where it goes, and start building, like you said, John, just start building a name for yourself.
Yeah, the Field of Dreams business approach isn't really a good way to go about it. We're not going to build 20 tractors and hope with it, the customers are going to show up at our doorstep wanting to buy those chickens. You've got to test that market and make sure that, and you grow with your market, right? Okay, I can add 10 more customers or sell, 50 more chickens this year. Well, by all means, and you have loyal customers that keep coming back, and then you get referrals, and that's the basic way traditionally people built businesses, right? Especially when it's a product that they're creating. And you hand it to them and go, here, is this what you wanted? Yeah, that's great. I love it. Give me some more. I mean, it's a really easy business model to understand.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was really cool to see. Another cool thing, because they've integrated a lot of permaculture stuff in on the farm concepts, was how that they have a lot of the water catchment. So, they're looking at areas of the land that would be like low spots, and they build them into ponds and to catch water. And a lot of their water that's fed on to the different parts of their property is all pulled by gravity off of those ponds. So if the power were to go out, they'd still be able to move water all around. But it took them, years to set up all that infrastructure, because they're running all the pipes throughout the pastures coming off the ponds and everything, and in spigots, or valves that you can put in the ponds so that you can drain each pond as they were lowered from the water that they catch and everything. But instead of letting that water run off your land and possibly create erosion and things like that, that if you can build ponds and ways to capture that water on your property, that you can use it to your benefit. So there were cool things like that. And also talked about getting access, so that they spent a lot of money on the infrastructure, creating the road access to access each one of their pastures. And he talked about how you kind of want to have it in the middle, I guess, of the land if you're gonna plant it. So like basically the idea is like you want to minimize your impact on your soil of your pastures is what he was talking about, because the more you have to drive into your pastures, the more you're going to be compacting the soils, and overall will be a detriment to your soils over time by all that compaction and stuff. So that was one thing that they spent quite a bit of capital on, was to create a good infrastructure on their roads for their access to get everywhere on the farm.
Cool.
So that was it, of all the things that they spent money on. That was one of the big ones, was putting in the road infrastructure for the farms. But yeah, really cool. He explained how, when you go through your forests and there's like these European forests where these trees are also very well manicured, like everything is cut, all the branches are cut off, like so that there are no branches like reaching down low. They're all cut up high or whatever. And there were people coming through and asking all these Europeans with all this land, like, how do you get the forest to look so nice? Like, why is the forest looking so nice? And they were saying because of royalty, because these lands were in these families for like 800 years, and they managed the forests in a particular way. And so he was talking about that, like, we don't have most of the lands in the United States are temporary, so the longest you may have it is one generation. And so he talked about how, the selecting of trees in the forests and getting rid of the weaker trees to build like the kind of a silvopasture, and pigs are kind of critical in that, because they kind of help keep the land cleared and can clear out new lands for new pastures, and opening that up to more pasture lands with the pigs and stuff like that. So, and he also rotates his pigs, does rotational paddocks with the pigs as well. So it's all the animals have their unique thing, and kind of work the way God intended them to work, I guess.
So you're going to be releasing a documentary here coming up pretty soon on your trip?
Yeah, so I'm working on editing a video, kind of like a teaser for what happened at the Exit and Build conference. So, I don't want to step on their toes. They had a professional film crew out there that were filming all of the basically all the talks and everything like that. And I'll probably put together one, and a longer form one for our group, and maybe I'll show that to everybody at one of our meetings, and but put a shorter one out there, just kind of showing the experience of the Exit and Build Land Summit. And I think they're going to do more out there at Polyface. So there'll probably be another event in the coming years out there at Joel's farm for this type of conference. But yeah, all in all, it was a really cool experience, and glad I went, and it was worthwhile.
Dream to go and visit Polyface Farms, that's for sure. One of the top bucket list things for sure.
It's really cool. It's really inspiring, what he's done there. So I really do think that, one of the things they talked about was how the average age of a farmer now is like in their 60s. So you can look at that like, oh crap, or you could be like, wow, there's an incredible opportunity here for younger people to get into this, because there's going to be a huge need for it. So, and the older way, the conventional way of farming, is you get into a ton of debt, right? And you're always got to be able to meet. You're basically, just constantly running on this wheel of debt, And if you can do it a different way that is economic, that's going to heal and restore the land, that makes a lot of sense. So I think that once people figure this out, and folks are demonstrating it and showing you that it works, there'll be more and more people that want to go in that direction. So, but the big thing is getting younger people into it. There's not a whole lot of programs out there for maybe young farmers. And there's probably more than Joel's, but I guess Joel has kind of created the model there for like how you can bring in some younger people to learn this stuff that they've learned over so many years and be able to get that out to more younger people. But maybe focusing on like education for whatever farming enterprise or homestead that you have, that more of this information that can get out to the younger people would be really valuable, because we're going to need a whole new generation of farmers, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them too. So that was a big takeaway. So guys, we're up on an hour. If you guys got anything else you want to talk about, or we can wrap it up and kind of just go around the horn.
Yeah, I'll start us off. Logan Hyde at Hideaway Homestead on YouTube, or you can email me at hideawayhomestead@gmail.com.
Awesome.
All right.
John Tejan, I'm on X as Soul Survivor 78. I just recently changed the name of my account, not the address, to Grass Farmer John instead of just Farmer John. So I think that's a little more
appropriate.
What I do. Yeah, right. And I hope people don't get confused on which grass I'm talking about. So yeah.
I don't know, with that tie-dye shirt you got on.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with it. Absolutely. I just like the colors,
John will come to the stream one day with pink eye, and we'll be like, sure, John, sure.
All right. I'm Greg Dow. The channel here is the Tinker Tribe, and I got a lot of folks that I'm going to be looking to interview here in the near future. So if you guys like what we talk about, subscribe, hit a like, let us know what you think in the comments of what we're talking about here. And, keep following along. Every Sunday night we get together and we have a roundtable chat here. So other than that, we'll see you guys next time, and hope everybody has a wonderful week.
Peace.